Imagine, for a moment, that you are a ripple upon the surface of an endless ocean, a fleeting disturbance in the water, rising and falling, believing itself to be separate from the depths below. You take shape, crest for an instant, then dissolve back into the vastness, never truly having been apart from it. Now, consider this. If the ripple was never truly born as an independent thing, how could it ever truly die? It was only ever the ocean itself, momentarily expressing itself in a dance of form and formlessness. This is the paradox at the heart of our inquiry. You were never born, so how can you die? To even approach this question is to step beyond the boundaries of ordinary thought, into a space where time, identity, and existence itself are revealed as fluid, perhaps even illusory. We are accustomed to thinking of ourselves as discrete entities, born at a certain time, living a linear life, and then vanishing into nothingness at death. But what if this is merely the surface story, a convenient fiction that the mind tells itself to make sense of the unfathomable? The great mystics, sages, and philosophers across traditions have whispered a different truth, that what we call birth is not the beginning, and what we call death is not the end. In the Upanishads, it is said, there is no birth, nor death, only an endless becoming. The Taoist sages speak of the eternal Tao, the unnameable source from which all things arise and return, like waves to the sea. Even in modern physics, the boundaries between self and other, between existence and non-existence, blur into questions of energy, vibration, and interconnected fields. So let us begin by suspending our assumptions. If you were never born, if the you that you take yourself to be is not an isolated, permanent entity but a temporary expression of something far vaster, then the fear of death loses its grip. The terror of annihilation is rooted in the belief that there was something to annihilate in the first place. But if the self is more like a character in a dream, a role being played in the grand theater of existence, then the end of the role is not the end of the actor. Think of a flame passed from one candle to another. The first flame is extinguished, yet the fire continues. Is it the same flame? A different one? The question itself may be missing the point. The essence of fire was never confined to a single wick. In the same way, the essence of you was never confined to the body. The name, the story you've been told is yours. This is not merely an abstract philosophy. It is an invitation to experience reality differently. To live as if you were never born is to live without the weight of a fixed identity, without the looming shadow of an endpoint. It is to recognize yourself as the space in which life happens, rather than the fleeting forms that pass through it. And if this is true, then death is not an enemy, but a return, an unraveling of a knot that was only ever loosely tied. Core themes and concepts: the unborn self and the mirage of mortality. To truly grasp the essence of you were never born, so how can you die? We must first untangle the illusions that bind us to the idea of a fixed, separate self. The mind, in its ceaseless attempt to navigate the world, constructs a story, a narrative of me, with a beginning, a middle, and an inevitable end. But what if the story is not the ultimate truth, only a useful fiction? What if the self we cling to is more like a shadow cast by a flickering flame, real in appearance, yet without substance of its own? The illusion of separation. From the moment we first recognize our reflection, we are taught to think of ourselves as distinct entities, bodies with names, histories, and futures. We are told we were born on a certain day, that we will grow, accumulate experiences, and one day cease to be. But this linear narrative ignores a deeper truth. Existence does not operate in isolated compartments. The air you breathe was once exhaled by forests. The water in your cells has flowed through rivers and oceans long before you drank it. Even your thoughts are not truly yours. They arise from language, culture, and the echoes of conversations long past. In this sense, the you that claims ownership of life is more like a whirlpool in a river, appearing to have its own shape, yet never separate from the current. The whirlpool does not begin when the water starts spinning, nor does it end when the motion subsides. It is simply the river expressing itself in a particular way. So too, the self is not a thing that comes and goes, but a pattern within something far greater. The myth of birth and death. Birth, in the conventional sense, is seen as the moment a new individual enters the world. But what is actually born? The body is a rearrangement of elements that have always existed. The consciousness that animates it, does it spring from nothing? Or is it more like a wave rising from the ocean, never truly apart from its source? Many wisdom traditions suggest that what we call birth is merely the focusing of awareness into a particular form, and death is its release. In the Tibetan Buddhist view, consciousness is like a torch passed between lifetimes, not created or destroyed, only transformed. Similarly, in Advaita Vedanta, the individual soul, jiva, is understood as a temporary reflection of the absolute, Brahman, like moonlight dancing on water. The moon does not rise or fall in the lake, only its appearance does. If this is so, then death is not an annihilation but a dissolution, a return to a state of unbounded being. The fear of death arises from the mistaken belief that we are the form, rather than that which inhabits it. Time as a story, not a law. We measure our lives in years, as if time were an absolute ruler, dictating beginnings and endings. But time itself is a construct, a way for the mind to make sense of change. In deeper states of awareness, meditation, mystical experience, or even moments of profound love, time falls away. There is only the eternal now. If there is no true past or future, only an ever-present unfolding, then the idea of being born at one point and dying at another loses its solidity. The self is not a thing moving through time, but a flickering in timelessness. Imagine watching a film and believing the characters are born when they appear on screen and die when the scene ends. Yet the entire movie exists at once. The birth and death of the characters are just part of the narrative. The dream of identity. Every night you dream. In those dreams, you may take on different roles. Hero, wanderer, fugitive, believing fully in each identity until you wake. Upon awakening, you realize none of those selves were ultimately real. They were projections, temporary formations of mind. What if waking life is the same? What if the you that worries about death is just another role being played in a much vaster dream? The mystic knows this, that the personal self is a costume, not the wearer. When the costume is removed, the actor remains. This is not nihilism, it is liberation. To realize you were never born in the way you thought is to be free from the tyranny of time, the dread of endings. It is to live from the understanding that you are not a drop in the ocean, but the ocean in a drop. Deeper symbolic narratives, the eternal in the ephemeral. Myths and symbols have always been the language of the unseen, whispering truths too vast for ordinary speech. To explore the idea that you were never born, so how can you die? We turn to the stories that have, for centuries, pointed beyond the veil of appearances. These are not mere fables, but mirrors held up to reality, reflecting back the paradox of our existence, that we seem to be, yet are not, that we appear to die, yet cannot. The flame in the wind. There is an ancient parable told in many forms. A flame burns steadily in a windless room, and a traveler asks, "Where does the flame go when it is extinguished?" The wise one responds, "The flame does not go anywhere. It was never a thing to begin with, only the temporary dance of heat and light. When the conditions change, the dance ends, but the essence, the capacity for fire, remains." This is the nature of what we call the self. Like the flame, it appears to have independence, yet it is entirely dependent on circumstances, oxygen, fuel, space. When the body perishes, the particular arrangement of awareness we called I ceases, but does awareness itself vanish? Or does it return, like fire unmanifested, waiting for the next spark? The wave in the ocean. A wave rises in the sea, crests, and falls back into the depths. In its brief life, it may believe itself separate, unique in its shape, its journey. But the ocean knows no separation. The wave was never born. It was the ocean moving in a certain way. And when it subsides, it does not die. It simply remerges with its source. We are like that wave. The body, the personality, the story of me, these are transient formations. But the awareness that perceives them, the silent presence behind all experience, that does not come or go. It is the ocean, not the wave, that is the deeper truth. The actor and the role. Imagine a play where an actor becomes so absorbed in his role that he forgets he is acting. He weeps at his character's tragedies, fears his character's death. Then, in a moment of lucidity, he remembers, I am not the prince, I am the one who plays him. The relief is immense. The prince's fate is not his own. Life is much the same. We identify so completely with our roles, parent, worker, seeker, that we forget we are the awareness behind them. Death, then, is not the end of us, but the end of a role. The actor remains, ready for the next performance, or perhaps finally free of the stage altogether. The dreamer awakens. A man dreams of a great journey, crossing deserts, climbing mountains, facing dangers. He feels fear, joy, exhaustion. Then he wakes, and in an instant, the entire epic vanishes. The dream hero was never real. The dream death never happened. Yet the dreamer remains. What if our lives are like that dream? What if the I we defend, the life we cling to, is just a character in a story we've been telling ourselves? Awakening is the realization that we are not the dream figure, but the dreamer, the space in which all stories unfold. The mirror and the reflection. A mirror reflects countless images, faces, landscapes, shifting light. Each appears, lingers, fades. But the mirror is unchanged. If a reflection could speak, it might cry, I am disappearing. Yet the mirror knows, no reflection is ever truly born, so none can ever be lost. Consciousness is that mirror. Thoughts, sensations, identities arise and pass like reflections. We mistake ourselves for the image, not the clear, unchanging awareness that holds it all. The invitation in the symbols. These stories are not meant to dismiss life's richness, but to reveal its depth. They point to a truth beyond concepts, that the fear of death is the fear of an illusion. If you were never confined to a single form, how could you be destroyed? This understanding does not trivialize existence, it sanctifies it. When we know ourselves as the ocean, not the wave, we live with both detachment and fierce love. The wave's dance matters, but its end is not a tragedy. Practical integration and real-world implications. Living as the unborn. To realize you were never born is not to withdraw from life, but to engage with it more fully, freely, fearlessly, without the weight of a false separation. This understanding is not some abstract philosophy reserved for monks and mystics. It has immediate, tangible consequences in how we navigate our daily existence. When the illusion of being a limited, mortal self begins to dissolve, everything changes. Our relationships, our work, our joys, and even our sorrows. The end of fear. Fear of death is the root of all fears, the silent tremor beneath anxieties about loss, failure, or irrelevance. But if death is seen not as an end, but as a shift in form, like a wave returning to the sea, then what is there to dread? This is not a call to carelessness, but to a profound relaxation into life. When fear of the inevitable falls away, energy once spent on resistance becomes available for living. Consider how differently we might approach our days if we knew, deeply, that no experience could destroy us. Risks would feel less daunting. Love would be offered more freely, without the subconscious bargaining of what if I lose them? Even grief, when it comes, would carry a different quality, less like an abyss and more like a bittersweet acknowledgement of love's temporal expressions. The fluidity of identity. Most of our suffering arises from clinging to identities. I am a success, I am a failure, I am unloved, I am wise. We defend these stories fiercely, as if they were our very selves. But if the self is more like a river than a statue, constantly flowing, never the same from one moment to the next, then these rigid labels lose their grip. Imagine waking up each morning not as a fixed someone, but as an open space of awareness, ready to meet the day without old narratives. Mistakes would no longer define you. Praise would not inflate you. You would act, not from the need to uphold an image, but from the spontaneity of the present moment. This is true authenticity, not the cultivation of a personality, but the freedom from all personas. Love without possession. We often love as if we, and those we love are fragile, temporary things. We grasp, we cling, we fear separation. But if neither you nor the other were ever truly born as separate entities, then love is not a bond between two isolated beings, but a recognition of shared being. This shifts everything. To love in this way is to celebrate the other's presence without demanding its permanence. It is to see them as you see yourself, an expression of the same boundless life momentarily taking form. Relationships become less about ownership and more about communion, less you and me, and more this, the ineffable reality we both are. Work as sacred play. When the idea of a doer dissolves, work transforms. No longer a means to build a legacy or prove worth, it becomes an offering, an act of participation in the unfolding whole. A potter shaping clay does not ask, "Will this cup outlast me?" She simply pours her creativity into the moment. This is the spirit of karma yoga, the path of selfless action. Whether you are painting a mural, balancing ledgers, or raising a child, the work is no longer for the sake of the I, but for the sake of the doing itself. The pressure to achieve vanishes. What remains is the joy of contribution. Suffering as a storm in the sky. Pain is inevitable in life, but suffering, the mental resistance to pain, is optional. When we take ourselves to be the limited self, every hardship feels like a personal affront. But when we recognize our true nature as the space in which all experiences arise, pain becomes like a storm passing through the vast sky. The sky does not resist the storm, nor is it damaged by it. This does not mean we become passive. We still act to alleviate pain, our own and others, but without the added layer of "why is this happening to me?" The distinction is subtle but life-changing. Suffering is what happens when pain meets resistance. Peace is what happens when pain is allowed to simply be. Death as a return. For most, death is the ultimate adversary. But seen through the lens of the unborn self, it is neither enemy nor friend. It is simply what happens when the current expression of life completes its dance. Just as a leaf does not lament its fall from the tree, knowing, in its own way, that it was never separate from the earth, so too can we release the fear of dissolution. This does not negate the poignancy of endings. Goodbyes will still ache, and the mind will still wonder what comes next. But beneath that uncertainty, there can be a quiet trust, the same trust a river has as it merges with the sea. Living the realization. To integrate this understanding is not to adopt a new belief system, but to unlearn the old one, the deep-seated assumption that you are a fragment, adrift in a hostile universe. It is to sense, in moments of stillness, that you are not in the world, but the world is in you. And from that shift, life unfolds differently, lighter, more vivid, less burdened by the illusion of separation. Conclusion and transformational call. The unbound self. We began with a question that defies ordinary logic. If you were never born, how can you die? And through our exploration, we have circled a truth that cannot be grasped by the intellect alone, only glimpsed, like moonlight on water, always present but impossible to hold. This is not a philosophy to be believed, but a reality to be recognized. Just as the sky does not need to believe in its own vastness, or the ocean in its depth, you do not need to convince yourself of your true nature. You only need to pause, to look, to see what has always been here before the first thought arose and will remain long after the last one fades. The illusion unraveled. All fear, all suffering, all longing springs from one fundamental misperception, the belief that you are a separate self, a fleeting form bound by time. But every moment of joy, every experience of love, every flash of pure presence whispers the opposite, that you are not the traveler, but the path, not the dancer, but the dance. When this is seen, even for an instant, the world shimmers with a new light. The same life that once felt fragile now feels infinite. Relationships deepen not because they last forever, but because they are no longer burdened by the demand to do so. Work becomes art, not because it achieves greatness, but because it is offered freely, without the need for legacy. Even grief softens, not because loss hurts less, but because love is revealed as something that cannot be lost. The invitation. This is your call, not to adopt a new identity, but to release all identities. not to become something better, but to see that you were never the problem to begin with. The mind will resist, of course. It will argue, demand proof, spin new stories. Let it. You are not the mind. You are the awareness that watches the mind. Try this now. First, let go of all ideas of who you are, your name, your history, your roles. For just a few seconds, don't know. What remains? That silent, spacious presence. That is what you are. It was here before words, before memories, before the thought that arose. It will be here when all else falls away. It is not yours. It is you, living as awareness. To live from this understanding is not to withdraw from life, but to meet it more intimately. It is to love without fear, knowing no true connection can be broken. Act without attachment, because the joy is in the doing, not the outcome. Rest without effort, because you are already home. This is the secret the sages have pointed to for millennia. You are not a drop seeking the ocean. You are the ocean, dreaming itself a drop. The final release. So when death comes, as it will, in its time, it will not be the end of you, but the end of an idea. The body will return to earth, the mind to silence, but what you truly are cannot come or go. It is the space in which the entire drama of life unfolds, the unchanging background, the silent witness, the no thing that holds all things. You were never born. So how can you die? Now, the invitation is yours. Not to believe these words, but to test them, to look deeply into your own experience and ask, what am I really? When the question becomes more alive than the answer, something shifts. The world remains the same, but you are no longer trapped in it. You are free, not in some distant future, but here, now, as the boundless awareness that has always been reading these very words. This is the end of seeking, and the beginning of truly living.